Welcome back to another reaction and ting. I'm Mr. Giant. Yes, I am. We continuing the series on the Crusades, and this installment is called "How Rust Survived Mongols and the Crusaders: Rise of Novgorod." Novgorod. I hope I pronounced that right. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm interested to see what going on with these Crusades. I hope you guys are too. Thank you all so much for watching these with me. You know what I mean? Hope you guys are taking care of each other out there, man. You know what I mean? Let's go ahead and YouTube and simmer and see what'll go on with this here.
In the mid-13th century, the land that had once been the mighty Kievan Rus was a smouldering husk. Its cities and villages burnt down, its people slaughtered under a hail of Mongol arrows. However, one of them, the oldest Rus city, Novgorod the Great, was a world away from the devastation. Its walls still stood firm, the bells of the Nereditsa church still tolled, and its streets were abustle with lively commerce. In this video, we will explore how a free republic caught between Mongol hordes to the east and Catholic crusaders to the west would scheme, bargain, and fight to survive. It's really weird that so many common-day topics remain taboo, so we're happy to say that the sponsor of this video, Manscaped, has been on the front line of destroying one of them. Men do need grooming, and Manscaped is the global leader in men's grooming and hygiene with its Perfect Package 3.0. The main historian for the channels, or go to manscaped.com and enter our promo code KINGS for 20% off and free shipping. Help Manscaped help you. We must rewind the clock a few centuries to contextualize the city of Novgorod's rise to prominence as an autonomous power in the pre-Mongol era. As you may recall from our previous episodes, Novgorod was the original capital of the Rus, founded by Rurik around 860. Even after Rurik's successor Oleg moved the capital to Kiev, Novgorod remained influential. The people of Novgorod had always been free-willed, so when the Kievan Rus began splintering in the early 12th century, the old northern capital emerged as one of the most dynamic independent powers. Novgorod ruled over a prosperous trading empire, with the city itself serving as a central hub of international commerce. This Novgorodian state had a unique system of government, as it was not a hereditary monarchy, but a republic since 1136, when the powerful merchant lords of Novgorod, backed by the general citizenry, overthrew Prince Vsevolod of Pskov. Legislative power in Novgorod was controlled by the Vircha, a form of public assembly consisting of nobles, clergy, merchants, and commoners. Novgorod still had a prince, but he had to be elected by the council and could be fired if necessary. That is not to say that the Novgorodian princes became...
Isn't it amazing how we create these complicated system of things, and then we try to get everybody to follow that specific system of things? And most people follow. I mean, most people try to do the right thing. But it just, sometimes systems get to the point where it just doesn't seem to be trickling down so that everybody's enjoying all the fruits of the labors and things, you know what I'm saying? But it's crazy how, we just set up cultures and all kind of stuff, so kind of find some order in life, you know what I mean? And each of us think ours is the best. I don't know. Let's keep watching this here.
Became meaningless figureheads. In fact, a particular prince would soon emerge as one of medieval Rus's greatest military leaders, and to many, the savior of the Rus culture and faith. In the year 1220, a boy known as Alexander was born to the Vsevolodovich dynasty, who ruled Peroslavl, and later Vladimir. The young princeling likely spent his childhood years learning to fight and lead men. It was probably due to this pedigree that in 1236 his father dropped him off in Novgorod and the city council elected him to be their prince, beseeching the young noble to take charge of the city's military affairs. This was an incredibly tall order for a 16-year-old, as the city was in crisis. To the east, the unstoppable horde of Batu Khan was thundering across the Rus heartland, and it would only be a matter of time before the Mongols would come to Novgorod. In the west, the situation was just as volatile, as starting in the 12th century, various Latin Christian powers had made headways into northern Europe. The Vikings of Scandinavia abandoned their old gods by the mid-1100s and became more or less Christianized, which allowed them to expand under the pretext of Holy Crusade. The Kingdom of Sweden, in particular, began making ingresses into Finland, claiming it was converting the pagans of the region to Christianity, and by 1216, the Pope had recognized Swedish suzerainty over Finland. This expansion put Sweden on a collision course with Novgorod, who had economic and territorial interests in Karelia. The Catholic and Orthodox churches had finally begun to overlap in the north. Both sides desired land and power, and considered the other to be heretics, so the potential for war was brewing. According to the Chronicle of Novgorod,
You see how powerful religion could be? When used by man for their own gains. It's a powerful tool. I mean, look at all these quote-unquote cults that pop up ever so often, you know? I think it's even more powerful than nationalism, really. But it's a powerful tool if used by the wrong person, for sure.
in the summer of 1240, a Swedish army led by Bishop of Finland Thomas sailed up the Gulf of Finland in their longboats. They then proceeded into the Neva River with the aim of seizing control over Lake Ladoga, and from there, striking at the city of Novgorod itself. As the story goes, Prince Alexander wasted no time in rallying his Druzhina and confronting the Swedish host on the Neva, decisively routing the Western invaders. It should be noted that the battle at the Neva is never described in Swedish sources, and this has led some scholars to question if the battle at the Neva even happened in the first place. However, most agree it was likely an impromptu border skirmish rather than a full-scale invasion. Whatever the case, the young Prince Alexander had won his first military victory at the age of 19 and received his first sobriquet, Nevsky. Alexander's success had made him some enemies as well, particularly the boyars and merchants of Novgorod, who believed that his war jeopardized the delicate trade relations in the region. Soon, the political situation deteriorated to the point where Nevsky and his soldiers left the city. This was bad timing indeed, for the Swedes were not the only Catholics who had ambitions to take Novgorod territory. It is now we move our focus south to the dense forests of the Baltic Rim. Much like Finland and Karelia, this region was one of the last holdouts of paganism in Europe. The ancestors of the modern Lithuanians, Latvians and Estonians had been fighting a losing war against German and Danish invaders, who sought to convert them to Latin Christianity by force. By 1228, much of the Baltic shore had been subdued by German Catholics, except for the Estonian coast, which became Danish. This land became known as Terra Mariana, the land of the Virgin Mary. It was an unstable colonial frontier, divided into several bishoprics, directly sworn to the Pope in Rome, but still inhabited by Baltic peoples who continued to resist Catholic overlordship through guerrilla warfare.
Wow, that's
Throughout
crazy.
all this turmoil, a pair of knightly orders rose as the apex predators of the northeast. In Latvia and its environs, the Livonian Brothers of the Sword were dominant. At the same time, directly to their south, the Teutonic Order waged a bloody crusade against the pagans of old Prussia, establishing control over the region. However, the balance of power was soon to shift. In 1236, with the backing of the papacy, the Brothers of the Sword launched an expedition across the Daugava River to subdue and convert the Lithuanians. However, Lithuanian tribes took advantage of the swampy forests of their homeland, ambushed the knights, and annihilated their invasion force. So crushing was this defeat to the Brothers of the Sword that their remaining members had to join the Teutonic Order. Now rebranded as the Livonian Order, they quickly rebuilt themselves into a powerful, autonomous chapter of the Teutons, and this allowed them to wage a more effective war upon the indigenous pagans. By 1240, the Livonian Knights had established firm control on land as far east as Lake Peipus, and they now neighboured the Novgorod Republic. Once more, Catholic and Orthodox spheres of influence crashed together in northern Europe. The Council of Novgorod was initially divided on how to deal with the ever-encroaching Crusaders. Initially, Slavic merchants prospered as trading partners with the Germans and Scandinavians, and intermarriage between the Rus and newcomer nobility was not uncommon. These ties to the west had been why Nevsky was forced into exile after his victory at the Neva. After all, what merchant would allow a glory-seeking prince to chase off their best customers? However, relations between West and East had begun to sour from 1224, when the Livonian Knights took Tartu, a city that Novgorod considered to be within its political orbit. The Crusaders also ramped up their efforts to convince the Novgorod aristocracy to convert to Latin Christianity.
Man, all that politics going on in between there, you know, this little sector is talking to that little sector, and this is going on here, and everything is sort of like chaos, but it's still controlled within a culture or religious, belief or something like that. It's just all over the place going on there, man, non-stop. That history is just like churning along, That's crazy.
Which irritated the Slavs, for whom their orthodoxy was the heart of their society. As diplomacy deteriorated, the German knights began to gaze greedily at the wealth of Novgorod, which, in their eyes, was a fair target as non-Catholics. Around the year 1240, Pope Gregory IX finally authorized a crusade against Novgorod, hoping that the Republic would be too preoccupied dealing with the Mongols to the east to defend. That same year, the Livonian Knights stormed the outpost of Koporia, conquering it with little resistance. They established a permanent garrison and began the construction of a stone castle, which made it evident to the people of Novgorod that the knights had come to conquer. Now in crisis mode, the Vizier of Novgorod turned back to the prince they had just exiled, begging him to return. Nevsky obliged, making haste for the northern capital. By the time he arrived, the Crusaders had taken Novgorod's sister city and breadbasket, Pskov. In the hands of an occupying force, it was a dagger pointed at the heart of the capital itself. Alexander knew that he had not a moment to waste, and in the autumn of 1241, he struck back, storming Koporia's brand new castle and capturing it swiftly. In the spring of 1242, he joined with the forces of his brother Andrei and thundered into Pskov, retaking the city with little effort, likely because the Teutonic Knights were preoccupied fighting the Mongols in Hungary at the time. Nevsky's swift military successes can likely be attributed to his Druzhina, the archetypal elite warrior retinue that had been a staple of Rus princes for centuries. Nevsky's force traveled light, taking towns and castles before their crusader enemy had a chance to respond, a manner of warfare akin to his pagan ancestor Sviatoslav the Snow Leopard 3 centuries prior.
The Snow Leopard.
Successes,
that's a kind of cool
Nevsky
name.
mustered up a citizen militia to supplement his Druzhina's limited numbers, and launched an offensive raid into Catholic Estonia, breaking his army off into contingents to raid and pillage the countryside. This was a mistake, for he had overextended his forces, and the Teutons and their Estonian allies managed to ambush and destroy one of the Rus raiding parties in an ambush on a river crossing southwest of Tartu. Nevsky decided to cut his losses and orchestrated a careful retreat. Meanwhile, the Crusaders had been hastily assembling an army for a second invasion into Rus lands. Led by Bishop Hermann of Dorpat, it consisted of a corps of knights alongside an allied contingent
A bishop
of
is leading
soldiers
it.
and native Baltic auxiliaries. By spring,
Was
they
a
had
bishop
begun
a different
pursuing
thing
Nevsky's
back
army
then?
northwards.
Comment down below, let me
In
know.
April of 1242, the opposing armies met upon the frozen surface of Lake Peipus. Novgorod forces numbered some 5,000, while the Crusader alliance totaled at around 2,600. The Catholics may have been outnumbered, but it was Nevsky who was outgunned. Apart from the Prince's Druzhina and a contingent of allied Turkic horse archers, the Rus army was predominantly the poorly equipped, poorly trained militia raised from Novgorod's general citizenry. Furthermore, the Crusader army had something the Rus did not: heavy cavalry. Nevsky was direly aware of the fact that, in the hands of a capable commander, a single deadly charge from a few hundred mounted knights could rout his entire army in minutes. Nevertheless, against all the odds, the Novgorod militia held the line against the couched lances of the Black Cross, allowing Nevsky to successfully pull off a pincer move with his horse archer and Druzhina units, driving the knights and their allies off the field. The day had been seized by the East Slavs. This conflict, later immortalized as the Battle on the Ice, was a watershed moment in the relationship between medieval Rus and Catholic Europe. A permanent border between Novgorod and the Crusader states was established along Lake Peipus and the Narva River, and never again would the Teutons or their allies make serious ingress into Rus territories. For his victory, Alexander Nevsky earned immortality, known by all future generations of East Slavs as a saint who saved Orthodox Christianity. Now let us move back to the east and address the Chinggisid-shaped elephant in the room. While all this Crusader business had been happening, the Mongols had been ravaging their way through the northeastern
Here comes the Mongols.
principalities. Nevsky's solution for the Mongol problem was simple: surrender. While other Rus cities mounted futile resistance against Batu Khan, Nevsky instead sent envoys, preemptively capitulating before the Mongols even reached his city, and accepting the Chinggisid Khans as his lawful overlords. Because Novgorod had surrendered so quickly and willingly, it was spared the destruction that other influential Rus cities were subjected to. Why was Nevsky so willing to capitulate to the Mongols, but so insistent on fighting the Crusaders tooth and nail? The answer was simple. To those who showed proper obedience, the Mongols ruled with a light touch. They had no interest in influencing their subjects' religion, culture, or prevailing system of government, so long as they paid tribute without issue, and allowed the Mongol Khans to confirm their leaders. Contrast this to the Crusaders, who had every intention of forcefully eradicating Orthodox Christianity, and one can begin to see why the Novgorodians preferred a steppe warlord to a German bishop. Nevsky spent the rest of his life as a loyal vassal of the Great Khan, making many trips to the Mongol capitals of Sarai and Karakorum to pay his respects. The ruler of Novgorod used his submission to the Mongols as a key to political advancement. Indeed, the Mongol Khan bestowed upon him the title of Grand Prince of Kiev in 1246. Of course, in the aftermath of the Mongol conquests, Kiev was a shell of its former self, but the title itself still held significant symbolic power and gave him an edge over other Rus princes who now competed for the Khan's favor. Alexander would only continue to grow more and more influential under the Mongols' wing. In 1252, his brother Andrei reigned as the Prince of Vladimir. However, when Khan Monkur ascended as ruler of the Mongol Empire, Andrei refused to travel to Karakorum to have his princeship confirmed. As a result, the Golden Horde launched a punitive expedition into Vladimir, chasing Andrei out of his lands and forcing him into exile in Sweden. In his place, Nevsky was confirmed as the Mongol-appointed Prince of Vladimir as a reward for his continued loyalty. Nevsky paid off the confidence the Mongols showed him in dividends, defending their authority whenever the need arose. In 1259, When the citizenry of Novgorod revolted and refused to pay tribute to the Khans, Nevsky marched into the city with soldiers, forcing his own people to obey their Mongol masters by force of arms. Nevsky died in 1263, taken by illness while journeying home from one of his trips to pay homage to the Khan in Sarai. The Rus he left behind was a complex one. On one hand, invaders from the west were defeated, their religion saved in the process. On the other, it had been utterly ravaged by the Mongols, becoming subjects of a foreign empire. The legacies of St. Olga, Vladimir the Great, and Yaroslav the Wise remained in the form of their faith, culture, and identity that they had helped build. But as the various Rus princes slowly reconsolidated their lands and power under the watchful eye of Mongol overlordship, it became clear that the age of the Kievan Rus was long behind them, and a new era had begun in what would become Russia. We'll continue this series in the coming months, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. It helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons.
That was interesting there. I mean, to in a way force his own people to be subject to someone else. I guess he did the right thing to a certain degree, because it helped maintain the culture and the religion, I guess. But then again, he was he was subjugated, to someone from the outside telling him what to do, and if his own people rebel, he had to quell that rebellion. What a position to be in. It's a strange legacy to leave. But anyway, man, thank you all for watching this with me. Hope you guys are, chilling out and enjoying life. Excuse me, the allergies in the place, but you all take care of each other, alright? Cool runnings.